Hello everyone, it's Types, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 decks in the Pokemon TCG that are rotating and that you may have forgotten about or may not have known in the first place at all. These are all decks that, or the lists specifically, are all lists that have rotated. They have rotated cards in them, but I want to talk about some of these cards, and specifically, I think, are they all VMAXs? They may all be, no, they're not all VMAXs. One of them is not a VMAX, and they're the 5 lists, but I'll talk about them more in depth. They're all multi-prizers, but they have single prize elements to them, or at least a bunch of them do. And first of all, I want to talk about the Italian engine. This is something that I know newer players don't know very well. This was a Sword and Shield base set card, or at least part of it was. This Inteleon is actually still in format, and same with this Sable, but this Sable isn't very important. But the most important card from this engine was the Drizzile. Drizzile, with its ability Shady Dealings, it also had 90 HP, which was nice, but we'll get to that in a minute. But its ability says when you evolve into it, and you can evolve a bunch of Drizziles potentially, then you search your deck for a trainer and put it into your hand. So obviously there are a lot of trainers, and trainers are incredibly useful because they can search out your Pokemon or your energies, or maybe other trainers. And so we do see high counts of trainers. We see I mean, it's not an absurdly high amount of trainers. It's kind of normal, but you can play a variety of trainers. We see Vanna Waves, Tool Scrapper, Scoop Up Net, and Phoebe, as well as Palpad and Tool Jammer, all those one-ofs. And then we see a card like Energy Search, and as well as, of course, a decent amount of Pokemon Search here because you can search a trainer, and that trainer will then in turn become essentially a Pokemon or an energy. On top of that, we also have the Inteleon from the same set, again with the Shady Dealings, a stage 2 now evolving from Drizzile, and instead of searching for one trainer, you search for 2 on play. Additionally, it has an attack that does 120 for a water and a colorless, and then 20 your opponent's benched. This is okay. And then there's another Inteleon from Chilling Rain, currently in Standard, but will be rotating, with its ability here, Quick Shooting. When you use it once during your turn. You can use this every turn. It's not on play, so you can play the Drizzile for its on play ability, and then play this Inteleon for consistent value throughout the game. And then you put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So this is like kind of like Iron Valiant EX, which is in Standard right now and sees a bunch of play. There are a number of cards that's kind of like as well. There's a Decidueye GX. There's a bunch, but it was very good because it's just free damage and a decent amount at that. And you can still play it, and it's not really played very much anymore, but it is technically a card you can play. And just without this Drizzile, it's underwhelming. We have Crobat V, which rotated, which is a draw supporter. We have Marnie, Research, Boss, which were the fundamental supporters we'll see in a lot of these lists. And then in terms of energy, we have Capture, which is interesting, as well as Quick Ball, Evolution, Incense, and Level Ball, which are all forms of Pokemon Search. So as I said, you want high amounts of Pokemon Search because then you can play Level Ball, which gets 90 HP or less Pokemon, which is why Drizzile being 90 HP is really important. So a Level Ball and Evolution Incense essentially acts as search for any trainer, assuming you have a Sable or a Drizzile in play, which most of the time you will. And so obviously now you have these incredibly consistent decks, and then we get to the attacker. And so there are a lot of Inteleon engine decks. Some that I won't be talking about in this video include Jolteon VMAX with Inteleon engine, as well as the Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Inteleon engine deck. Both of those are good, but I think those cards are more known, especially Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. But Leafeon VMAX is a really interesting VMAX that is still in format, but really terrible right now. Or maybe not really terrible, but not very good. You can play it in some decks. We see it played in. You could play it in like Lost Zone. I don't know why you'd play it in Lost Zone, but you can play it with Arceus because it does counter Grass Weak Pokemon, but it's not amazing. So we do have your first attack here, though, the main build around it, and essentially the only attack used in this deck. Grass Knot for Grass Colorless. It does 60 for each colorless in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So there's mainly one Pokemon right now that this is terrible against, which is Mew VMAX. Once Mew VMAX came out, people started putting Glare and Moltres V in their decks, but quite frankly, it wasn't as good. That being said, also you preferably want ways to increase your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat costs. We do a Spidops EX. We have Calamitous Wasteland as well. There are a few ways, and they are okay, but back in the day, I should say, we had Galar Mine, which is already rotated, which is a big reason why Leafeon VMAX is not good. This said the retreat cost of both active Pokemon is 2 colors more. We see, as I said, Calamitous Wasteland, I believe is the name of the card, which increases basic HP non-fighting Pokemon's retreat cost by one colorless, which will increase Leaf End's damage some, but not as much as Galamine, and of course it's not as universal. So that means Leaf End Vmax is not very good right now, but it used to be so good. Most Pokemon had a retreat cost of 2. With Galar Mine, you'd be hitting um, with if they had a retreat cost of 4. There were some other cards you could use to increase this. There was an Absol, which rotated by this point, but was played a little. There was a little bit of time when Evolving Skies came out, and then rotation didn't happen right away. But for the most part, you play it with Galar Mine, and then you could also run Tool Jammer. So obviously UV maxes for your tree, but most Pokemon don't, and so you could put a card like Air Balloon. Right now we don't actually have anything like that right now. We're gonna have Emergency Board. Okay, we also have Future Booster Energy Capsule. There we go. Which removes retreat, so you want to play Tool Jammer, so you can turn stuff like that off. And then you are hitting, as I said, as if they had a retreat cost of 4, which will be 240. If they have a retreat cost of 1, you boost up to 2, you're hitting 180, which isn't too bad and is good enough. If they have free retreat, it's bad though. So this deck was a very good deck and a really fun deck, and also Leafeon V I should highlight, which is also rotating. Leafeon V Star. Uh, I don't know. Some of these decks probably run Leafeon V Star. But Leafeon V Star is a card that is not rotating because I know V Stars are rotating, but it kind of relies on this Leafeon V with its ability greening cells when during your turn. I mean, it ends your turn using this ability, but you search for grass energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. This is the same as Zacian V from Celebrations, except that was Psychic type, and that also had a good attack. But Leafeon V's ability meant that you could. It was quite good. Another card I'll mention here is Scoop Up Net, which does kind of what you'd expect. It returns a Pokemon on all card and like the evolutions, but not the cards attached to it into your hand, and it does not scoop up what is it, V's and GXs. You can scoop up EXs. You can scoop up, most importantly, single prizers. So you're going to be scooping up or Radiant Pokemon as well, but you want to scoop up Inteleon Engine, so you can use this Drizzle and then this Inteleon, and then use them again using Scoop Up Net, which is quite useful. Moving on to the next Inteleon Engine deck, this one is really fun. And the 2 main cards, in addition to the Inteleon Engine, or maybe 3 main cards, are Suicune, Ludicolo, and Melanie. All came out kind of together. Melanie did not. Melanie was a little before, but for those of you who don't know, attach a water energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon V if you do draw 3 cards. This is similar to a card like Welder, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, Melanie, it was quite good with Pokemon V water decks and also decks like Urshifu, Arceus, and things like that. But anyway, Suicune V, this is very similar to Palkia and still sees play in like Palkia decks and stuff. But it's not a mainstay in many decks. But Suicune V, this is the same as Raikou V and Entei V. For those who don't know, it's a different type, slightly different stats, but very similar. And fleet-footed, if it's in the active, you can draw a card, which is nice. It's a really simple ability, but it's cool. And Blizzard Rondo, it does for watercolorless 20 and 20 more for each opponent's bench for each players, bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. So if your opponent has no bench Pokemon, you'll hit 120, assuming you have a full bench of 5. And then if your opponent has a full bench, and so do you, you hit 220, which is quite a lot. For 2 energy on a basic Pokemon. This is similar to Palkia V-Star. Palkia V-Star hits exactly 40 more damage than Suicune V. And so sometimes those are played together. Suicune V obviously being a basic, and Palkia V-Star is not a basic. So there is some advantage there, but for the most part, Suicune V was kind of played less once Palkia came out. And then we see, of course, 220 is not enough to one-shot all the Pokemon in the game by any means. 220 is around 100 short to one-shot all the Pokemon in the game. So we conveniently had this little Ludicolo. And by the way, if you need to add an extra amount of damage, you can do this in Teleon. But Ludicolo here on play as a stage 2, and on play your basic Pokemon's attacks do 100 more damage. This is really funny, and we see the deck was pretty popular. This doesn't look that popular. Limitless's dataset is missing some stuff, shall I say. But this deck was very popular. and really fun because you could use this Ludicolo to do massive damage. But obviously it's a stage 2, and it's like it's on play. It's just on play. It has no value after that. You can technically attack with it, but it's pretty terrible. You'd much rather attack with this Inteleon, which has more HP and does bench damage. But you could go ahead and just do big damage with Ludicolo. You could even hit with, I guess, Lotad or Sobble. Sobble was not the best attacking option. If you don't know, Sobble flips coins to attack, so you could fail an attack. But you could buff damage on low HP Pokemon with Ludicolo, or low damage output and probably low HP Pokemon with Ludicolo. You can also double Ludicolo, play 2 in 1 turn to get 200 extra damage. That was pretty difficult. And obviously, not the most likely thing, but it is a possibility. And overall, you had these fun little combos going on. You also had Raihan, which accelerates energy if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn, and then search for any card. That's kind of like Melanie. You do get that unlimited search, but in some sense, you have a lot of search already as well. Due to Quick Ball, Evolution, Intense, and Level Ball. Of course, this deck without consistent search, without Drizzle, kind of fell apart and died. And of course, Palkia V-Star, as I said, kind of replaced it. But this deck was really fun. And I personally like the Inteleon engine. I know some people did not. I think there are some people who just don't like whatever's good, though. This was a very fun engine because you just got to play lots of cards. It was a little, I don't know if I'd say it was complicated. In fact, I wouldn't necessarily say it was complicated. And certainly, once you got the hang of it, it was very linear, which I admittedly could see some people not liking, but it did open up the option for tech cards. And then, of course, the turns were kind of long, which was a funny and a not so funny thing at the same time. They weren't awful in my opinion, but I'm sure there's some people who will complain because they probably didn't really play much Italian engine and played against it a lot, and the turns were long. But this is a really fun engine, as I showed you in Leafeon and Suicune V. Those are different decks. They played somewhat similarly because of the engine, and the engine takes up a lot of deck space, which is a really like defining aspect of it, meaning that it kind of defines your style of play, which is really powerful and very fun. And we saw it with a lot of different decks. Zed Urshifu, Jolteon, Suicune, there's Ice Rider Calyrex Vmax. I'm not going to be covering that in today's video. That was a deck that was fine. I was never the biggest fan. But there are a lot of Italian engine decks. They mostly paired with Vmaxes, but the Italian engine were not Vmaxes, so you had some interesting dynamics, especially if you were attacking with a single person Italian, which later became its kind of its own deck. There's this deck, which is not, I mean, it's not really relevant at all, but it kind of revolves around like this weird water box with lots of Italians. And then there was the classic Radiant Charizard deck, which like didn't really have a lot of attackers, which was kind of funny. And then you definitely need to attack with this Inteleon. If you do not, it plays. I guess it plays 2 water energy. Inteleon engines also sometimes ran like really low counts of stuff. Inteleon engine kind of fun, kind of broken as well. Next up, we have Victini Vmax. Not gonna lie, I didn't really look at the list before I was going in, so this is not the Victini list I thought, but I'm happy this is the Victini list we have. Actually, I'm gonna pull up the other Victini list, and kind of insult it because it kind of deserves it, and you'll see in a second. So if you've noticed, pretty much all the lists, I think all the lists we're looking at are 3 rows. If you look at like a normal like a deck right now, it's going to be I think 4 rows. Yeah, so 4 rows, and that's pretty common. It means the list is easier to fit on screen for me, but it means the decks play less cards. But let's find that fun little Victini list. When was it? When was it most popular? Maybe here, maybe not. It was never the most popular, but I think this is it. Never mind that. What even is this link? There we go. We found one. This is 2 lines. 2 lines is not a lot. So this was how the deck used or was is more known to be played. I did remember that this was like a way it was played, and you could play it with a number of things. But after the rotation of a card called Welder, it was not played with Welder, but obviously. But so Victini VMAX will just highlight with max victory for fire colorless. It does 220 if your opponent's active as a Pokemon V, which was many Pokemon. Right now, this doesn't see play like at all because like who's playing Pokemon V, right? I mean, people are, but people aren't as well. If you're up against a non-Pokemon V deck, you're kind of screwed because you only hit 100. So if you're against Chien-Pao, you will lose. But if you're against Charizard and Gardevoir, you'll probably also lose. You also have a first attack that accelerates some energy, but it's not that important. But yeah, this deck is very simple. You play Crushing Hammer and Pokemon Catcher and Kabu. Kabu is a weird card that says it's shuffle draw 8 if you have one Pokemon in play, if only you're active, which creates obviously very boring games. For Fan of Waves, this card is not very good. It's not an awful card by any means, and certainly a copy or two could be nice, but 4 isn't necessary. But yeah, this deck was like when people say like a deck's a brain deck, like you just play your cards that you have in your hand. It's really boring. Um, but we're gonna take a look at the more interesting build, and this is a Welder box. So Welder is kind of like Melanie, attached up to 2 fire energy from your hand to your one of your Pokemon if you do draw 3 cards. And fire was very good during this time period. We see Reshiram and Charizard GX. I'm not going to talk about that in this video. Comment down below though if you want to see me talk about tag teams in like the late GX era. I know that obviously a lot of people have joined since then and like don't really know much about them, and they're really interesting. They might deserve a video all on their own. But pushing that aside, yeah, we're not going to talk about that right now. Nor Heatran GX because this card's fine. But we're going to talk about Double V. I guess no, we don't really talk about Double V. Double V is kind of boring. I think it's the same attack as Zamazenta V, but it's colorless. Galarian Raptors V, is this in format? It is in format. Okay, I did not remember if it was or not. It will be rotating. Libra Horn for 2 colors. Put damage counters on your opponent's one of your opponent's Pokemon until its remaining HP is 100. This may remind you of a certain card called Sarina EX, except it's worse, I guess. I mean, it's 2 colors. It's a really interesting card, and it can do substantial amounts of damage. Of course, the major downside is 100 HP is still a lot, but just the right amount. If you're up against a Pokemon that has big HP, like Reshiram and Charizard GX, that is not a Pokemon V, you can just swing in with Galarian Raptors V and then do that 100 with Victini Vmax. There's also this Victini V, which was okay, that rotated a little while ago. It also runs the Jirachi engine, and I'll talk about Jirachi engine now a little bit. This rotated a little while ago, but still, actually, like a while ago. But still, I wish if it's in your active, once during your turn, you may look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal a train you find there, put into your hand, then shuffle. And this Pokemon is now asleep as well, so you can't retreat it out. But people would just play like lots of Switch. It's very similar to Comfy and Mew. Yeah, and then on top of that, you'd need some extra draw power. You'd see Dene GX, Crobat V, which I've talked about before, briefly, and Eldegoss V are just all on play abilities that are quite good. Dene GX is, in my opinion, it's a very fun card. It's very broken, but very fun. And then you have the Broken Welder, which is really good with Reshiram Charizard, Heatran double, and very nice with the Victini VMAX. As I showed in the other list, you did not need to play it, but you could. If you weren't playing Welder, this list ran 4 boss. I don't know actually why it runs 4 boss, but it does. And then you go in with that. Also, reset stamps, you'd have some disruption. But for the most part, you just go in with Victini and hit hard. If you're in certain other matchups, if you're playing the other build where you just have Victini, you'd probably lose. But if you were playing with this build, you could pivot into other attackers for other matchups. But for the most part, Victini Vmax hits 220, which is very similar to, or same amount of damage as that Suicune V as its max damage. A similar amount of damage to Leafeon Vmax, I said 180 or 240, hopefully. And then there were other cards that hit similar amounts of damage, but these were some of the big ones. And so, honestly, some people would argue the game got a little boring with these VMAXs just saying these same amounts of numbers. And with that Victini VMAX deck that was 2 lines, yeah, that probably was boring. But this deck had some interesting aspects. Victini was a really fun deck. Arguably, I didn't play it very much, but I know some people loved it. Next up, we have Single Strike Urshifu VMAX. And we got the GOAT Fiona, a notoriously decent card in themed. We got Jirachi GX World Champion. I was gonna like look for the list, but this seems like a pain to dig through. Wait, what is this? Oh, that okay. Yeah, so I'm not going to look for that. Actually, yeah, I will. There we go. World Champion. When you look at that, it's Jirachi GX. But it removes weakness. It's like Dunsparce. Dunsparce. I kind of stuttered and said Dunsparce, but no, it's like Dunsparce, where it removes the basic weakness of a certain type. At this time, it removes psychic weakness, and Urshifu's weak to psychic. Um, and then we have some attacker. We have one attacker. We do have Stonejourner. This one, I think some of you may know from Lugia. But we're not talking about Lugia today. We are talking about Urshifu. Urshifu with this is single strike Urshifu Vmax, which I was like, oh, I could talk about Rapid Strike, but let's be honest, you probably know that better than single strike because it was better for longer and is still good now. So obviously a lot of the cards that we're talking about today aren't going to be a big factor rotating, but are interesting cards. Single strike Urshifu VMAX, beat down for 100 for 3 colorless is something. It's not unusable in some senses. In some situations, it's incredibly good. In many, it is not, though. It's only 100 for 3 on a 3 prize, essentially evolution Pokemon, which is not ideal. But then you have VMAX 1 Blow for 4 energy, fighting, colorless. You hit 270. And then you discard all energy from this Pokemon. It's not affected. It hits 2 effects as well, which is nice. 270 is a good amount, but it doesn't look like it's one-shotting. But then you, of course, have single strike energy, which buffs your damage by 30 or by 20, and you can have up to 4 on, but you probably have up to 3. So you're hitting at like 330. You can put it to whatever amount you want, but 330 is normal. And then because you need to accelerate 3 energy and attach 1 from hand. You could also attack with single strike Urshifu V, which does 180 for 3, which is pretty decent. And then you have Houndoom, which accelerates the energy, and then you damage yourself. So you accelerate energy from a single strike energy from your deck, specifically the card single strike energy. This does not accelerate an energy that is of the single strike like type or whatever. Um, Other than the card name single strike energy. That ruling is a little confusing if you don't know it. It doesn't really matter. But you'd accelerate energy. You do damage yourself in the process, but it's okay. Hopefully, it might not be okay. But overall, very powerful. As I said, you have the Stonejourner, you have the Scroll, you have this Tower, you have Urn. Urn of Vitality is really important. Recovering single strike energy. In this, the Houndoom Urn single strike energy combo was so good and is like the best thing about single strike because you can hit this big damage, but you can ramp to it. It's really good. And all 3 of those kind of work together to create this incredibly powerful deck that also like needs a bunch of setup because you need a bunch of Houndooms. If you ever played a Flaffy deck or a Zadu deck or an Electric deck or Malamar deck or any card like a Stage 1, that accelerates energy, but only one, you know you need a lot of stage ones. Versus if you're playing like Bexcalibur or a Cherim, you just need one of those in play. But this, you need a bunch of Houndooms. So you need a lot of bench Pokemon, and then you'd have these like Crobat Vs, Today GXs, Jirachi GXs, maybe Fion. Fion gets out of play, but you have these Pokemon sapping a bench space, which isn't ideal. So this deck kind of quickly fell off. We did see Houndoom played with Gengar VMAX and Umbreon VMAX. Umbreon VMAX is the best now, but Gengar is probably the second best. No one really plays Single Strike Urshifu VMAX. You can play it in a Lugia, but I guess it's more common than I thought. But currently, it's not being played very much. When was this? Yeah, so it's not being played very much right now. Overall, Single Strike was a really cool deck, a very straightforward one. You just get lots of energy on your Urshifu and then just one-shot stuff. But overall, pretty cool deck. Lastly, we're taking a look at the biggest one-hit wonder ever, or something like that. Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX. This deck was so insanely good for like such a short period of time because of a few cards. Notably, we have, of course, Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX itself. Its insane ability Underworld Door. Once during a turn, you may attach a Psychic Energy from your hand to one of your bench Psychic Pokemon. If you did, draw 2. So this is a draw engine. But it's not just a draw engine, it's an energy accelerator. Of course, I just mentioned Zadu. This is pretty much the same as Zadu. A little worse. You can accelerate to other types, but quite frankly, why do you want to, I guess? Then you have Max Geist. For 3 colors, you do 10 and 30 more for each psychic energy attached to all your Pokemon. Same attack, I believe exactly, not energy cost-wise, but exactly same damage as Mewtwo EX, Terra Mewtwo EX from Paradox Rift. And this is... Wait, is that the right set? Yeah, Paradox Shift. There we go. So this is the same. It's kind of taking Zadu and Mewtwo and sticking it together, which is good. Of course, that deck ramps damage and energy a little slowly. You need at least a turn to buy yourself some time. You do have Alchemy Vmax, but in terms of buying yourself a turn, Alchemy Vmax, by the way, is kind of like Chimp How. It's a Vmax, but and it rotated a little earlier. Gengar Vmax rotated even earlier. But this card was broken. Its GX attack pretty much said that your opponent can't do anything next turn. Now, normally you're just wasting your turn as well using this attack that doesn't really do anything. You can use it for its extra energy, which is useful, but not the most useful, let's be honest. It's like, I don't know, it draws you cards, and it also draws your opponent cards, and you can kind of punish them for having a big hand with your attack here, but that wasn't a great option. The better option was that you'd use Gengar and Mimikyu to buy yourself an extra turn and get 3 to 4 more energies in play, and then off of those energies, you could do 120 more damage, which is a lot more damage than however much you were going to do last turn. So then you're hitting these massive amounts of damage, and you had so many ways to just control the game with Path to the Peak. Marshadow, which is like Path to the Peak now people play, Lost Vacuum. And you had Disruption. You could also play Trevenant and Dusknoir. Overall, this deck was super broken for a really short period of time. And then, so this is part of the weakness cycle. I mentioned Single Strike, Urshifu, VMAX, and Rap Strike also was quite good. Shadow Rider countered those decks super well. At least, more specifically, the Rap Strike deck. It was okay against the Single Strike deck, but insanely good against the Rapid Strike deck because they could never one-shot or even two-shot. Maybe they could maybe two-shot Shadow Rider, Calyrex, VMAX, but probably not. And so for the most part, they were just relying on not seeing you. This was the best, like insanely good against Rapid Strike. And then in the next set, they pressed a counter as unsurprisingly they would. And this was like smack dab in the middle of the Pokemon prints a really broken card, and the next set prints a counter to it, and so on. A cycle between Psychic, Fighting, and Darkness. Pokemon is starting with a year earlier with Dragapult VMAX, ending with Umbreon. But anyway, I just wanted to reawaken some memories of old cards you may have forgotten about that were good and aren't so good and are rotating. But overall, I know some people like this era and some people didn't. Overall, though, I think it's always important to remember historical Pokemon cards, at least until Black and White on. Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and before that's erased from the history books or something. I don't know. Um, yeah, Pokemon has removed it. No more Legacy, RIP Legacy. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing. I have an exciting video that's loosely related to this coming up. I'm going to talk about some mechanics. I think I haven't decided yet, but I plan on making that video coming up, and I'm really excited for that. That will be more edited and hopefully much better, higher quality content. I want to, unsurprisingly, continue to improve my quality of content. Right now, I don't really edit my content very much, but as I'm sure you can tell. But I want to take that next step. I am approaching 1,000 subscribers as well. I'm really happy about that, everyone. It's super cool. If you have content suggestions, leave them down in the comments below, as well as deck ideas as well. I'm always open to deck ideas that are interesting, though. Make sure they're interesting. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, as I said, consider subscribing, liking the video, commenting, hitting the bell. I don't actually know anyone who hits the bell, but if you do, that's cool. And I hope you enjoyed. As always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.